with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, hey, the jobless claims this week was less than 1 million. I think, that's still like a terrible number, less than 1 million.
Wow.
But, compared to where we've come from.
Go get a neck cream.
It's actually, the number was 881,000. Hey, look, it's still a terrible number. I get that. We got a lot of people out of work. We got to get our restaurants open. We got to get our entertainment industry open. Imagine how many industries around the country are still just out of business. They have, except for hair salons in San Francisco.
Something we have to discuss. We're not getting out of this one. You're not getting out of here without that. That's happening.
Oh my goodness! Right. What a classic shot. A picture says 1,000 words. That one wrote a whole book.
And she becomes the victim.
Yeah. Oh, I was set up.
So
set
Pelosi.
Up for what?
It's so Pelosi. It makes me sick.
I'm selling 10 bricks of cocaine here, and I'm selling, but I was set up because they knew about it. What a defense. That one does not pass the smell test. Hey, look, we got Chairman Kimberly Reid today of the EXIM Bank, the Export-Import Bank of the United States, a very, very important position in our federal government, appointed by the president, plays a very important role in America's trade and helping American exporters, including yours truly, sell more products and services overseas. And they have a conference coming up, a very important conference. It's going to be a virtual conference, September 9th through the 11th. And, they're really doing a full court press right now in order to get Americans in the game of exporting. And they have programs that is absolutely incredible. I've been very successful over many years. I think more than $150 million over the last few years I've exported because of the EXIM Bank. I got to tell you that.
Here's the bigger takeaway from that. I met you because of the head of the EXIM Bank out of Miami.
That's right.
About that.
That's right. That's
McCartney.
Right. Well, he was actually the head of the Export Council, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, but working very closely, U.S. Department of Commerce, the EXIM, the Export-Import Bank of the United States, U.S. Trade Representative's Office. It's all part of America's trade infrastructure. And we know jobs right now are very critical. And export jobs pay more than the average job. They're very, very important jobs for a country to have. And that's why so many people around the world are fighting to get that business. And America's been very bad at defending itself. So we're going to have Chairman Reid on the show here very shortly. But first, you told me that you watched our next guest on Tucker Carlson, and you said that he really knocked it out of the park. And, of course, we love the Federalists, and they just have so many great people working there. And we've been very honored to have a number of their people on our show. I love watching them out in the media. And we're very pleased to have today with us David Marcus, who is the New York correspondent for the Federalist. David, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you for having me.
So, very, very big topic right now is what in the world is happening in the New York metropolitan area. And I guess I lump in New Jersey and Connecticut, but of course, New York itself. And de Blasio, Cuomo, Governor Murphy over across the Hudson and Jersey. The citizens up there are fleeing in such huge numbers. Like, we've never seen this before. People are bailing out. Don't the politicians up there think that maybe they're doing something wrong for their citizens to want to leave so quickly?
I'm not familiar with many New York politicians who have ever imagined that they've ever done anything wrong. So I imagine that I imagine that they don't. They tend to think quite highly of themselves. I think they know it's a problem. I continue to be baffled by de Blasio and Cuomo in particular and their unwillingness to budge on things like indoor dining, theaters with sort of limited seating and stuff. I mean, the rules seem so capricious. I mean, New Yorkers shop at the grocery store every day, right? Like, it's not, nobody has a car. Grocery stores are small. It's not a situation where, like, you go and you get your groceries for the week, right? So, I mean, we're all packed into these grocery stores with our masks anyway. When you go to the bodegas, which are our little corner stores, nobody's even wearing masks. I mean, it doesn't make sense, and it's really destroying the city. Now, I am not a New York's never coming back guy. I'm not a I'm leaving New York guy. I would never leave New York. But I will say that the longer we let this go on, the longer it's going to take for us to come back, and it's dispiriting.
Well, you know what I find interesting? You just made a cool comment. I grew up in New York. I grew up in 20th Street between 3rd and Irving, a Gramercy Park guy.
Sure.
And so what did we do? We shopped in all the local stores, usually along First Avenue from 20th down and from 20th up to 23rd. And you learn about the neatness of New York City, the neighborhoods. Those who have small stores in the neighborhood gives definition to the neighborhood. Everyone knows everybody else. We went to school. We went to Vic's to have hamburgers, fries, and Cokes as kids on 19th and 1st growing up, and everyone knew everybody. There was such a communal, wonderful feeling in New York City. Loved it. Up until Kitty Genovese. You remember that, David? You're a New Yorker, right? So. Yeah. You grew up in New York City. So I know as a kid growing up in New York City, and obviously I'm older than you, but everything was wonderful, cool. I could go anywhere in the city, go to any museum, go around with my buddies, take the subways anywhere on bad weather days, go up to the UN and see what's going on there without any... 10 years old, I'm going up there up the First Avenue bus. But Kitty Genovese got killed. 33 people watched. Everyone said they didn't want to get involved. They were not interested. They were afraid. They backed away. And I have to tell you, from that point forward, I remember, and that goes to your comment about Giuliani, that the city just fell apart. It fell apart. Something happened. I remember that clearly. I got mugged twice. I got mugged in front of my doorman watched getting me, and then he had the audacity to try to get a Christmas present with typical New York. He said, "Hey, Mr. Rothman, what happened to your Christmas present?" "Well, my son got beat up." And he says, "Well, but so what? What does that got to do with me?" It's a typical New York guy. But truly, to me, it happened in the city. This is the closest thing I've seen that happened all those years ago, David. You feel that way too? That somehow, and that's why you said, Giuliani, where are you when we need you?
Absolutely. And listen, Giuliani's done enough for the city that the man certainly deserves a break. But, I actually grew up as a kid in Philly in the 80s. I came to New York as a college student in the very early 1990s. But I had been coming up to New York, so I certainly remember when Times Square was nothing but pornographic theaters and Broadway theaters. I mean, those two just oddly sort of existed next to each other in a strange way. And I was living here when Giuliani, as a very young man, as Giuliani transformed the city. And it was remarkable, and it was remarkably fast. I mean, by 1996, you could go to Alphabet City again. By 2000, you could go anywhere. And really, in almost total safety. That had to do with Giuliani. It had to do with Bloomberg. It had to do with a miraculous job done by the NYPD using new resources like Comstat and broken windows policing. And it was just a revolution of like how you run a city. And you're absolutely right. As soon as de Blasio took over, things started to turn. One thing to think of, everybody got mad at stop, question, and frisk. And de Blasio takes over. He says, "We're ending it. This is it." Now, listen, I think SQF got overused a little bit, maybe a lot, by the end of the Bloomberg administration. But everybody said, "Oh, look, stop, question, and frisk went away, and nothing changed with crime or murder or shooting. So, see, it didn't work." that's not true. And Heather McDonald's been great on this. A lot of people have been good on this. What Stop, Question, and Frisk did was it let criminals know and gang members know, if you're just walking around with this gun, you got a shot at getting arrested for illegally carrying a gun, even if you don't do anything else. So what did they do? They put the gun in a stash spot, or they left the gun at home. So what does that mean? That means that if you end up having beef with somebody, there's not a gun on you. You've got to go get the gun and come back. What a huge difference that is. So when you look at the shootings that we have that are just, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're at levels that we haven't seen since the bad old days. That's a big part of the reason why, is that under de Blasio, these gang members and these criminals feel absolutely emboldened to just pack heat wherever they go. And that's a disaster for a city like New York.
Yeah, I mean, but David, there's no end in sight, though, right? I mean, is there any winds blowing that they feel like they might have gone too far with this? I mean, as far as rolling back all this stuff, I mean, the pendulum has gone like way, way, way to the other side. We've only got like a 10, 15 seconds, and then we're going to have to take a quick break. But you want to comment just very quickly on that?
I think that it's the Democratic Party, the local Democratic Party, that is going to have to try to get control back, because like many cities across the country, they've lost control to Justice Democrats and these far left progressives. And I think they're the ones who are going to have to reestablish some kind of a party machine that's been decimated over the past couple decades.
Hey, folks, we're with David Marcus. He's a New York correspondent for the Federalist. We still got a lot more to talk about here together with Dr. Rich Rothman. Don't leave us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we are together with David Marcus, the New York correspondent for the Federalist. So, David, right now we kind of started to talk about law and order, and boy, has law and order now become a very big topic in the campaign. I mean, it was all coronavirus. I mean, it was almost 24/7, nothing else to talk about. And now it's riots and looting and anarchists and all of this sort of stuff going on the streets and the buildings burning down and all of these scenes that you're watching around the country. And you read in the media, and you get of course the liberal media. It's it's all justified, and if there's looting, it's because they deserve it. And then you see over on President Trump's side is that law and order, and the country's falling apart, and this is Joe Biden's America. And if you elect Democrats this November, this is coming to your town. Get ready; it's going to be very, very ugly. These are the things you're going to see all across the neighborhoods that are today peaceful. How much is this resonating in the country right now, do you believe? And do you believe that this will be the issue that ultimately decides who's president?
I mean, it's clearly resonating. I mean, I think especially when it came to Kenosha, Wisconsin. I mean, I think we're used to this stuff in Portland and Seattle. They've been known for this kind of thing for a very long time. I think what happened in Kenosha shocked the country. I understand that we don't see a ton of movement in the polls. It really depends on what poll you look at. But there's absolutely no doubt that the Biden campaign completely reversed itself from not talking about this at all in the Democratic National Convention and thinking this is not going to be an issue, to trying to confront it, front and center. So whatever's going on, the Biden campaign clearly understands that something's going on and that Joe Biden needed to try to more forcefully address the question. The problem is that his vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, when all of this started with the looting and the arson in Minneapolis, tweeted out to her 5 million followers, hey, why don't you go support the bail fund? So it's awfully hard to walk that back. Now, I know what she was doing. What she was doing at that time was she was a leading contender for the VP slot. she had a problem with progressives in terms of her law and order background. So this was a way to score some quick points with progressives. I'm sure she never imagined that these protests would spread like wildfire across the country, but they have. And I think the Democrats are really scrambling now. I think Biden's maybe in a better position than she is because he didn't do that. But even Biden, I mean, this is so clearly and transparently political at this point. It's been 3 months of this, and suddenly it's a problem. So, yeah, I think this caught the Democrats off guard, and I think there's no doubt that it is absolutely as much now an issue in the election as the coronavirus, which actually seems to be, if not abating, at least not in the sort of like fever pitch that it was even a month ago.
Well, it's interesting. You're right. It's not the fever pitch, and the fever pitch actually is what you're talking about. And that's the personal freedom, the ability to have a livelihood, the ability to raise your family. You know, I guess it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because apparently in certain cities in the United States, you've given up that right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what I was intrigued with in listening to you, and then, of course, reading you again in the real words, is that how willingly people in these cities we have given up our freedoms. We've just become, my God, lemmings. We're going to have to close down all the hair salons. We're going to have to close down the gyms, and it became a passion for certain governors and mayors to go after those who were opening up their gyms too early, opening up their hair salons too early. The woman in Texas was assaulted by somebody. The two guys in Chicago are on the radar for Murphy like a mother, going after him. So it's this willingness, and these guys are fighting. And then you see Pelosi go ahead and do her hair, and it's like, well, I have the right to do the hair because that's what socialist Marxists do. We are the elites, and we can do what we want to do because you do what we say, but not what we do. And I think that is going to be the calling cry. I think people right now should be absolutely inflamed watching the news over the last few nights, particularly last night with Pelosi, and saying, wait a minute, why can't I? Why does the government have the right to tell me I have to go bankrupt? That scares me, David.
No, I mean, listen, absolutely. I to your point, I'm working on a book about the lockdown that'll be out next year, and so I've been really doing a deep dive back into March, into April, into all of this stuff. And yes, I mean, the most amazing and almost chilling thing about this lockdown is that it was not enforced. It was consented to. And I think the American people have to take a look in the mirror and say, why did we do this? And, one of the things that I found in the book is that I think there are two institutions that drove this more than anything else. One is obviously the government, because the government puts these rules in place. But I believe equally important was the media. And I don't just mean the news media. I mean Hollywood, I mean television, I mean advertising, right? Remember the ads? A week into the lockdown, every ad was, we're in this together, and there was piano music, and it was like, this was sold to us. And I don't know if you guys remember an old book by lefty Noam Chomsky called Manufacturing Consent. Going back through all the stuff that he said about the corporate media back then from a progressive perspective, a lot of it's true today, but from a conservative perspective, because now we have these social media companies and the NBA and regular media companies, traditional media companies, going woke, right? Now they're super progressive. So all of these rules about here's how the media is manipulating you that Chomsky was talking about from the left back in 1988 when he wrote that book are really things that conservatives should be paying attention to today, because now it's happening to us. And that's a huge part of what happened and why the American people rolled over on this, most of us anyway, to the extent that we did.
Hey, David, very, very wise comments. Hey, we're going to have to get you back real soon. Still so much more to talk about with you. David Marcus, the New York correspondent for the Federalist. David, thanks for being on the show.
That was a pleasure.
Thank you. Coming up, we're going to have a very, very fascinating discussion with the folks at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Don't miss it.
made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruff. And as I told you, Rich, we are going to have a rocking show today. It's been so good. David Marcus from the Federalist, very smart guy. You see him all over television. And the folks from the Federalist are just really
they are
spot
spectacular.
On.
And you know what? They're smart as a whip, and they have such a great sense of humor. All of them.
And never lose your sense of humor. That's so important in life. But I've been an American exporter since I got out of college, and it's tough to be an American exporter. I'll tell you that. And the world is really stacked up against us. And, just after graduating from the university, I was in my early 20s. I worked in New York City for a short while, and then I got my dream job in Singapore, and I was off there. I think I was 23 years old, and there I was in the world of international trade as an American selling American products throughout Southeast Asia, East Asia, down through Australasia, and so forth. And let me tell you, I got a firsthand view of what it is going on out there with the Japanese and the Taiwanese and the Koreans and the Europeans. Back then, there wasn't the Chinese yet. They were still a very closed society, a closed country. And now, of course, you talk about China and what their governments do to support their exporters. And everybody knows around the world that exports mean jobs. And I'm not just talking about any job, but good paying jobs. And our country has kind of been late to the party of understanding, how vicious people are fighting for this business and what they will do to get this business. And how, and many times, we have not been structured very well or really understood the undercurrents that was going on between the foreign manufacturers and our manufacturers and who was winning jobs and we weren't and why were we losing and so forth. So, I came to learn very quickly that a very important part of my success was going to be the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Because American banks just don't finance exports. They don't give you credit for exports. If you want to get exports collateralized, your receivables and your inventory, U.S. banks are not the place to go. They say that they're international, but they're really not when it comes to international trade. And without the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and without their guarantees to American entrepreneurs such as myself, millions of jobs, and I mean millions of jobs with a capital M, would be lost. And these are really good paying jobs. And having said that, in my career and why I was successful and what I've been able to build as a company, now a $300 million business, I got several hundred employees. It all started in Southeast Asia with exporting American products. And I couldn't have done it without the Export-Import Bank of the United States. So that's why I'm very honored and pleased right now to have on the show the chairman of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, Chairman Kimberly Reed, together with Steve Reno, who is the Chief Banking Officer, to talk about their upcoming conference. We gotta hear about that. Plus, some of the things that we could do as a country and what they're doing and how this government agency is doing so many good things for American exporters and actually making money for our taxpayers. Think about that. What federal agency does that? I don't know of any other. Chairman Reed, Steve, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's great to be here.
So, Chairman Reed, you have an upcoming annual conference, and it's going to be held virtually on September 9th through 11th. And I looked at the list of speakers that you're having. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Can you tell us about the conference and, what's going to happen there and what American exporters can expect?
Absolutely. So for your listeners, I am fairly new to EXIM. I was confirmed in May of 2019, And the Export-Import Bank of the United States is an 86-year-old agency. So this will be my first annual conference as chairman. And because of COVID, we had to postpone it. It was to originally be in April, and so now we're doing it virtually, which, despite all the troubles in our country because of COVID, one good thing about us moving to a virtual platform for our annual Export-Import Bank conference is that we're allowed to have more small businesses hopefully join us and be engaged and learn about what it takes to get into exporting, and then how we can be that very targeted special tool. We have many different products, and Steve Rennick can share a little bit more in detail on those, but to help businesses in our country succeed, compete and succeed around the world. So if you go to our website, which is www.exim.gov, you'll see about the conference. But we're going to have leaders from the administration. So National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, National Economic Advisor to the President Larry Kudlow, Cabinet Secretaries, including Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, and several other of my administration colleagues. And then you're also going to be hearing from some CEOs of some companies, large and small, and then focus on small business. So we're going to have a very first small business track for all of your listeners who want to learn and be engaged. It's a great opportunity to do that from your home. And then you mentioned China. We have a special mandate on China that we can talk about, but we will be having members of the House China Task Force, chaired by Representative Michael McCall of Texas, also joining us. And to top everything off, early next week, I will be hosting the G12 of my export credit agency colleagues virtually. We were to also host that in person in Washington this year. That will take place virtually. And from that, we will have some of my colleagues from around the world participate in a panel. So we'll hear from countries like Canada, Italy, the UK, Germany, France, Russia, some of the G12 members of this heads of export credit agencies group. So it's a jam-packed, robust platform, and please check out our website to learn more about that.
Well, I think this is terrific. And actually, by being virtual, you're going to really open up a much larger group of people that will feel wonderful about coming and being involved and understanding the value. I mean, one of the takeaways, I was just listening to you, Kimberly, and the takeaway that export, trade, there's a direct correlation between that and job creation. It is an economic generator. It's very, very important. And folks definitely want to be involved in that to better themselves and position themselves in a much better environment. So when we come back from the break, Neil, we can pursue that a little bit more, because I think this is so vital for communities throughout the United States to build their base of success.
Yeah, folks, we're going to be back in just a moment with Chairman Reed and Steve Renno, who's Chief Banking Officer at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. And specifically, what can they do, or what are they doing to help our small businesses, our entrepreneurs, our risk takers? What are they doing to help them get into the foreign marketplace? It can be very daunting, but the Export-Import Bank has a lot of answers. Stick with us. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we're having a very fascinating, a very important discussion with Chairman Kimberly Reed of the Export-Import Bank of the United States and Steve Renno, who is the Chief Banking Officer. So, Steve, I'd like to get you into the discussion and let us know, as an entrepreneur, as a small business, it's so hard. The foreign market, it's so complicated, and especially how do you finance American exports, especially when the domestic banks, the local banks, don't look at exports as real collateral. I mean, so for folks that don't have unlimited bank accounts, the biggest challenge to getting involved in international trade is what do you do with that collateral if nobody's willing to loan against it? So what is XM doing to help our small businesses?
Neil, that's a great question, and it really goes to the sweet spot of what XM Bank provides to exporters, particularly small businesses. To the point that you made, a lot of banks are not interested in providing trade finance to small businesses. But that's where XM steps in to fill the gap. We don't replace the banking industry. We don't replace the export insurance industry. We supplement it where the private sector is not providing the capacity to the U.S. exporter marketplace. So there are two products that we provide, particularly used by small businesses, where there is a capacity gap. One is in the area of export insurance. This is to insure against non-payment by a foreign buyer of a U.S. exporter's transaction. Obviously, a small business does not have the bandwidth to be able to go to another country and pursue payment in that country's legal system. So the insurance that we provide against non-payment basically says, exporter, if you are not paid by your foreign buyer, we will pay you based on the premium that we provide. Another way in which we provide financing support to small businesses that need it is through working capital loan guarantees. Again, a lot of banks are reluctant to take on the credit risk of a small business and that small business's foreign buyers of their products. So they're unwilling to provide the working capital that small businesses need to be able to serve their export orders and to grow. So we tell these banks, if you make this working capital loan, XM will guarantee you against non-payment by the U.S. exporter.
And that's just a great opportunity for the small folks to partake in that trade business, Neil.
Well, we got to understand that the banks aren't financing export receivables, and larger companies may have other sources of funding, but our entrepreneurs and small businesses don't. And let me tell you, what is it? 75% of the world's wealth, 95% of the world's population is outside the United States. So if you tell an American small business that, hey, look, there's no way for you to export, it means that you're losing 75% of the world's marketplace. I mean, that's just unacceptable. So the Export-Import Bank is really the only answer. And Chairman Reed, I mean, is it a fact that the Export-Import Bank of the United States, I mean, it's created by an act of Congress. It's funded by Congress. So, folks, it's very important that your members of Congress know how important the Export-Import Bank of the United States is and that they support the bank. But Chairman Reed, isn't it true that XM returns a profit to the federal government?
Absolutely. So when we do deals, we charge interest and fees. And when we are doing billions of dollars of deals, we get back money as part of that transaction that we give to the U.S. Treasury. And so when we're fully operational, we provide over many years billions of dollars to the Treasury. Plus, we are a self-sustaining organization when that is happening. We just reopened XM. There's some politics at play with a small p of needing a Senate-confirmed board in place to be able to approve transactions over a certain dollar amount. And so for 4 years, we did not have an XM board confirmed by the United States Senate. And President Trump was really wanting our XM to be open because he heard loud and clear from our businesses around the country, we can't compete without having this bank to help us in what we do. And so the president showed some strong leadership, actually changed his views on the bank, and said, I want it, and he pushed us through the Senate last May. And so after 4 years of basically being shut, except to deals under $10 million, we're now reopened. And when the president swore me in the Oval Office, he challenged me to take this institution to new heights and reinvigorate what we do and help create even more great-paying jobs, because the rest of the world has their own EXIM, or Export Credit Agency. We now have 115 of them around the world. China has 2, and so we're back, and so we are now starting to really get it going again for our country. And thank you for helping us raise awareness with businesses of all size. At any one time, we could be supporting $135 billion in financing. Right now, we're at about $40 billion, so we've got a lot of room for growth to help our companies, which is never more important than, as we reopen our economy.
So, Chairman Reed, I can't improve upon that. I mean, it's a great vision. It's a great strategy. And for all the folks out there who's been critical of the Export-Import Bank, it is not corporate welfare. It is absolutely essential for our small businesses. And that's a big focus of the bank, is small business. It is small business. And I'm one of them. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be creating hundreds of jobs if it wasn't for my partnership with the XM Bank. Unfortunately, Chairman Reed and Steve, we're out of time. It went by very quickly, but I'd like to get you back real soon to talk about those future plans and the vision of taking the bank to the next step, because we have a lot of competitors out there, and they know the importance of financing their international trade. And we need to get that message out as much as we possibly can. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Neil and Dr. Rich. We really appreciate it. Have a great day. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, it's very, very rewarding, personally, that, we can talk to people like Chairman Kimberly Reed and Steve Renna of the Export-Import Bank and help them to get their message out there, because it's very important. I mean, and there was a lot of detractors of what they do. And as she said, it was closed for deals under $10 million and for 4 years. And our competitors are just standing on chairs and just cheering it on, because they know America is being taken out of the game when we don't have a robust way of financing our international trade. And I'm not so worried about the big companies. They have other alternatives. I'm talking about the millions and millions of exporters who don't have any other choice or chance to get in the game. 75% of the world's wealth, 95% of the world's population is not here. So you're eliminating how many millions of American dreamers, and the American dreamers who are trying to build their business, and they can't get into the business because nobody will take their collateral.
Yeah, well, it's very, very hard. And since, listen, Neil, as you well know, and me, we're a nation of small to mid-sized businesses. The guys and the women who are creating more jobs than anybody else in this country are guys like you. And not only that, it takes a unique person who can handle that risk, have the vision, handle the risk. They have all this stuff going. They have their business plans. They have all that ready to go and get out there and go get the money. And what happens? They can't get the money. And if they can't get the money, for example, we made it very clear that you can't collateralize the stuff you're sending overseas. The banks just don't relate to that whatsoever. They're losing contact and losing control. It doesn't work that way. So you need to have a leg up. And the XM Bank is that leg up for the small entrepreneur, visionary. The person who wants to get in the game has a great idea, has all the stuff going, but doesn't have the cake to do it. And the XM's a wonderful way to go. Interestingly, being in South Florida, being in a gateway community, which is what we are. Florida is a wonderful export-import state. We're a wonderful state for international business. So the XM is known. We know what's going on. It's important. There are meetings. There are functions. You can, well, in the old days, you can actually meet people and get out there and create business. So to do this and get the word out as you were just doing right now, I think that's a very vital project for us to be involved in, to help people get involved and get in the game. If you can't get in the game, you can't get anywhere. And if you haven't got the money, you can't get in the game. So, and on top of which, you're doing such a good thing because trade, is a pacifier. Trade encourages two-way discussion, makes life better, makes the world better, and gives a reason for everybody to want to know each other and get along. And it did it dramatically so in Latin America, incredibly so. So it was lovely to have Kimberly on the show today with Steve. Very excited to have had them.
So, and I agree 100%. I mean, exports, as we said, how many shows have we talked about trade and trade agreements? And by the way, let's talk about that for a second. Trade agreements, I support President Trump. I know he's out there fighting a tough fight. But I do disagree on trade agreements. Trade agreements are very important. And, we need to have access to foreign markets in the same way that foreign manufacturers have to our market. And the fact is that we trying to export our products and the barriers and the things that we face are so much greater than what people face when they try to sell to the United States. We are a much more open economy than just about anywhere.
Oh, sure.
Just about maybe not the most, but one of the most. But our exporters don't get that same favor when they want to sell their products to foreign countries. Regulation. It's not only tariffs. It's regulations. It's certifications. They have armies of engineers and bureaucrats and technocrats just sitting there trying to write up tariffs and codes and certifications that will prevent a product from moving across border. And they're very effective. And, it's just something that we need to wake up to. And I hope if President Trump wins the second term, and I believe he will, I hope that he focuses more on putting not just any trade agreement, but the right trade agreements in place, like we did with Mexico and Canada.
Yeah, and I think he would do that. I think he's open for that. His whole baseline was, look, we have to improve our trade agreements. We have to make them a win-win, and we have to win on this too. Seriously, win. But you know what? This is the one thing I've learned. We've done this together for so many years now. The world wants American-made products and ingenuity. Don't you agree with that statement? The world wants our products.
1,000%.
Yeah.
We need to have a way to get it to them.
Well, he just gave it everybody. Go to the XM Bank. Check them out. If you want to get in the game, they're a wonderful group of people to talk to. And we'll tell you more about it some other time.
So, Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time. But we're going to be again next week at the same time, in the same place, for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.